Hey guys, Dr. Justin Marchegiani here. Today we're going to be talking about the perimenopausal warning signs that most women ignore and maybe even a doctor even ignores. We're going to dive into it. If you're feeling these symptoms that we talk about today and it connects with the history, especially with your age, that it may not be anything outside of just hormonal imbalances and early perimenopause, even women in their 30s. So we're going to talk about it. We'll dive into the root causes. We'll talk about what to be aware of and then simple things we can do to start gaining that stability back in your hormonal health. All right, guys, before we do, please smash that like button. Really helps the search. And if you enjoy the content, please give me a thumbs up. And I'd love to see your comments down below. All right, so let's dive in. So what is perimenopause out of the gate? So there's a time frame in and around menopause. Peri just means in and around, where we start to have these menopausal symptoms. They're not quite menopause yet. We're starting to have more hot flashes. We're starting to have more of these hormonal symptoms that would typically be more PMS or premenstrual. Think about the symptoms that you may have throughout that week or so before your period: breast tenderness, cramping, mood issues, irritability. Now you're starting to have more of these throughout the entire month, but you're also mixing in some menopausal symptoms. Think of hot flashes, think of mood issues, think of sleep issues. May not be a flash, it may be more of a flush. We may also have lower libido, vaginal dryness, maybe collagen and elasticity issues of the skin and vaginal tissue. These could all be at play, right? I'll go through it a little bit more in depth, but we want to focus on the root cause, why it's happening, and what we have control over. So out of the gate, it's happening because there's fluctuations in the hormones. Follicular reserve goes down as you age, and so you're going to have less hormonal output from the follicles in your ovaries. And then, of course, the environment plays a big role because we have a lot of estrogenic toxins coming in that impact our hormones, that stress out our detoxification system. And detox is really important to get hormones that our body's using and get it out and be able to process it through our kidneys and through our stool. And if we have extra toxins in our environment, that could throw things off significantly. So we're going to dive in a little bit deeper here in just 1 second. All right. So first off, out of the gate, the biggest differentiator pattern with perimenopause and just typical hormone related symptoms for women is the pattern of fluctuating estrogen and progesterone, especially the declining right here, the decline in progesterone that happens in your early 40s and can even happen in your 30s as well. And I've seen it with 20-year-olds too, because, once you have parents go through this and you have a generation or two, the hormonal system of the offspring starts to get weaker. And especially when we start to have more plastics, more estrogenic compounds in our GMOs, in our glyphosate, mold toxins, and then also just more herbicides and pesticides that tend to have an estrogenic backbone, that creates more problems. So again, the biggest thing is we have this decline in estrogen and progesterone as we age. And progesterone is a big deal because progesterone pinch hits for cortisol. So the more stressed and the more inflamed we become, what happens to progesterone? It goes downstream to become cortisol and to deal with stress and inflammation. And then also what happens here too, we have a decrease of dopamine because dopamine goes downstream to deal with adrenaline. It becomes adrenaline, just like progesterone becomes cortisol. So the more stressed we are, the more cravings we have, the more irritability, that's going to deplete our neurotransmitters. And if our dopamine's low and weak, guess what? It's going to be harder to find enjoyment out of the things you do in your life, whether it's connection with a spouse, whether it's dealing with kids, whether it's just enjoying your hobbies and habits that you do on a daily basis. We want to really work on supporting the hormones and the brain because they're intimately connected. All right, so big thing. So when we look at perimenopause versus other health issues, so irregular periods are a big thing. Now, we could have this with thyroid problems. We could have it with just estrogen dominance, and it may not be connected to let's say, perimenopause. We could have PCOS, which is the biggest driver of infertility in women. So big issue there. Now, the big thing with perimenopause is the cycle starts to become shorter. We start to skip months. That's a big sign that we're starting to go more perimenopausal. We're starting to have some hot flashes. Now, again, hyperthyroidism, infections, anxiety, these may have no connection to perimenopause, but we start to see more of the hot flashes. That's a big, big sign. If our mood and anxiety starts to increase and become more cyclical in your 40s, that's a big sign that there could be some issues on the perimenopausal side, right? Now, depression, anxiety, these could be connected to blood sugar, but why it starts to happen more perimenopausal is because we start to have lower progesterone. and progesterone opens the GABA chloride channels. And so if we start depleting progesterone as we get into our 40s, that GABA goes less into our brain. And GABA is really important for calming down the brain, decreasing the glutamate, relaxing the brain activity, allowing your brain to be able to shut off. Think of GABA as the brakes, right? It's the brakes to relax the brain. Also, things like theanine help take the glutamate from inflammation in your brain, and it starts to bring it downstream back to GABA. Plus, we have lots of excitotoxins in our environment, whether it's a different aspartame or artificial sweeteners or flavorings like MSG. These are going to be excitotoxins and will overstimulate the glutamate in our brain, overactivate that glutamate. Talked about the mood issues. This is where women tend to get prescribed benzos, tend to get prescribed anti-anxiolytic medications. And again, these things don't fix the underlying problem. So it creates this polypharmacy cycle of one drug for one symptom, then that drug creates a side effect. Now we're on two drugs. And then if we don't fix the underlying issue, we don't fix, let's say we have an infection, let's say we have PCOS or hypothyroid, let's say we have estrogen dominance and a sluggish liver in detoxifying estrogen, then we're just doing Band-Aid mode, right? I am not anti-medication, but I am pro-root cause. And when we use medications to the detriment of ignoring root causes for years, that's a problem. You can ignore a root cause for a couple days, a couple weeks, but at some point you got to pay the piper. And so we want to make sure that we're always focusing. If you're on any medication now, just say, how is this helping me get to the root cause? And if it's not, I'm not saying you change the medication, start focusing on the root cause, and then work with your doctor to adjust that down the road once you've created stability. All right. So sleep issues is the big one too. You'll start to see it because progesterone opens those GABA chloride channels, helps relax the brain. So if you're having a hard time relaxing at night, it could be from that. Also, over time, as we become more perimenopausal, what happens? We start to become more insulin resistant. This is a big deal. Women come in and complain all the time. I'm starting to become, have more belly fat, a little bit more overweight and heavy. Why? It's like, well, first off, you're more insulin resistant. So that the habits of your 20s and 30s no longer work. You have to be walking more. You need more steps. You have to get your carbs in check. Your cortisol's out of whack. Your progesterone and estrogen are lowering, thus making you more insulin resistant. So we may want to look at estrogen and progesterone and support that. Now, we're going to do specific testing to look at estrogen and progesterone in the heart of the luteal phase, like around day 20. We may even look at estrogen in the early part of the cycle, in the follicular phase, around day 2 or 3. We may also look at and support the estrogen receptor sites with different herbs. And we may also look at DHEA sulfate, dihydroepiandrosterone sulfate. This is a precursor building block made by the adrenal glands. And this becomes the biggest raw material source as you become more perimenopausal. So as that follicular reserve drops over time, we have less estrogen coming from those follicles. So what comes into pinch hit? What comes in is that DHEA sulfate, dihydroepiandrosterone sulfate. Don't confuse that with the fish oil. That's DHA, that's docosahexaenoic acid. People confuse them all the time. So DHEA, that's the hormone precursor support. And we make less of that as we age if our adrenals have been beaten up. So if we start to have lots of cortisol issues, typically on the higher side and then eventually chronically low, and with a reverse cortisol pattern, that can be a big stressor for our female hormones. Typically, we have this nice cycle of high cortisol in the morning to lower at night. When this starts to flatten or even starts to reverse, relatively speaking, that can create more problems. Over time, we'll start to see the sex hormones, DHEA sulfate, drop along with that. And that means we're going to have less hormonal reserve to provide the building blocks in there. Think of DHEA as the backup generator. If you have a generator at your house, imagine it's empty. It's one of those gas-powered ones. You have to pour gasoline into it. Imagine you leave it full all the time. Well, now it's empty. Well, you plug it in, it stalls out in a couple hours, right? It's just like that. We want to keep our generator full. And how we do that is anti-inflammatory, nutrient-dense, low-toxin diet, good sleeping, good eating, good hydration, good nutrients, managing our stress. That's how we do that. All right, so fatigue's a big one too. We see that a lot. There could be a thyroid connection. There could be an anemia, low B12 or low iron. There could be low and poor digestion. There could be malabsorption that's impacting these things. Women could be very well-intentioned, trying to be vegan, vegetarian, and driving these deficiencies even though they think they're doing something good for the environment and their body, but maybe they're not, right? Because they're having these issues. And also, some women, they may overdo intermittent fasting. And with intermittent fasting, yeah, there's some benefits, but if you're chronically low calorie, then you're probably low nutrient as well. And that's going to create a stress response in the body. And again, brain fog starts to happen. If we have low nutrients, low B12, let's say we're trying to be low fat, low cholesterol. Well, guess what? Cholesterol is a very powerful antioxidant. It's the building block for your sex hormones, right? Any of your steroid-based hormones below the thyroid from our organs, whether it's our ovaries or adrenals, they typically come from cholesterol. And cholesterol is a powerful antioxidant and is very important for the brain. Very important for the brain. And also, if we're low fat, we may also be low in vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K, which are very important fat-soluble vitamins. And so we got to have good raw material for our cell membranes. Every single cell membrane has a lipid bilayer, 2 layers of fat that coat each cell. And so if we're not putting good fat, let's say we're trying to be vegetable oils, seed oils, we're trying to be more vegan fats, right? Plant-based fats. Well, a lot of those fats are more fragile. They're more prone to oxidation, and they're going to create more oxidative stress at the cell membrane level. And they can also create cellular rigidity, especially if you're doing more trans fats. That can create a lot more problems there and make the cell membranes very unhealthy. And then again, insulin resistance, like I already mentioned, insulin resistance, as you become more perimenopausal, that's going to create more problems because as you get older, you're going to have that drop in estrogen and progesterone that makes insulin resistance more of a problem. All right, so let's hit it. What are some of the root causes? Estrogen fluctuations are a big one. So now maybe estrogen is starting to drop or it's bouncing around because of low DHEA and just less follicular reserve. That's a big thing out of the gate. Okay, that's a big one. That can drive mood swings. That can drive heavy periods. That can drive breast tenderness. And again, we may want to do Dutch testing to look at the hormones to see what's going on hormonally. The progesterone decline is also a big one, right? So we're going to have potential ovulation issues, right? Maybe we're not ovulating at the right time of the month, right? Maybe a lot more anxious at around ovulation or right after ovulation. And again, adrenal dysfunction is a big driving factor of this, right? And then that can throw the HPA axis off, right? So the HPA axis is that feedback loop from the brain to the hormonal system downstream with the adrenals. And that feedback loop can get disrupted with chronic stress and chronic inflammation. And again, cortisol will compensate for these drop in sex hormones. So as the hormones drop, your body's going to use cortisol to deal with the stress and the inflammation that the hormones are not there helping with. And again, what happens? Fatigue, irritability, belly fat. And then over time, as insulin resistance sets in, as metabolism drops, we may start to see thyroid being a big driving factor in this. We may see that. We may see the weight gain. We may see cold hands. We may see hair loss. We may see mood issues. And I tell my female patients, there's a good chance you can have a lot of these things overlapping. It may not just be one thing. It may be a bunch of these things together. So don't get focused on one thing being the issue. It could be a combination of most, if not all. So I talked about thyroid. Now we have blood sugar instability. So we have insulin resistance, or I call it dysglycemia, where insulin starts to come higher. Now, we can also just have blood sugar that's bouncing around, this blood sugar that's going up and down throughout the day. That can create adrenaline, cortisol, and insulin surges. That can be a big deal. That can start to create the sugar cravings, the weight gain, and the fatigue after the meal. And again, there's different nutrients we may use, whether it's chromium, berberine, again, walking, strength training. These are all very helpful. Getting the glycemic index under control, the glycemic load under control. That's just how fast the carbs that you're taking in get into your bloodstream. The slower they snake in, the less insulin surges we have. And again, gut and liver overload play a big deal because you metabolize a lot of your hormones through liver, gallbladder into the gut. And so if we have bad bacteria in the gut, bad bacteria in the gut is going to create this enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. When beta-glucuronidase increases, that enzyme cleaves off conjugated estrogen. So it impacts how we're detoxifying estrogen. And if we have poor estrogen detox, that's going to create a lot more issues with these hormones going back into circulation and recycling. So that's a big deal out of the gate. So you really want to be very much aware of that. And again, this can create bloating, PMS, skin breakouts, a lot more acne, foggy brain. And then, of course, the sleep issue. So melatonin and progesterone, when they drop, that's going to decrease the GABA pathways. And again, that's going to create more difficulty going to sleep, waking up, hot flashes, etc. So we want to look deeper. So the big things we're going to look at, we're going to do Dutch testing. We're going to do maybe even blood testing as well. We're going to look at salivary cortisol. We're going to look at our thyroid panel. We're going to look at full thyroid. We're going to look at different nutrient testing, especially B12 and iron, vitamin D, magnesium. We're going to do a functional glucose tolerance test. So insulin, A1C is great. Fasting insulin is great. We'll also look at here in my side of the woods here, we're going to do a functional glucose tolerance. We're going to test our blood sugar before we eat. Okay. Test it before we eat. And then we're going to do 1 hour, 2 hours after a meal. We want to be no higher than 120 in the first hour and back below 100 in hour 2. Ideally, hour 2, if not hour 3, we test it again. That's a sign that our blood sugar is snaking along. The more our blood sugar snakes along, the less insulin surges we have, the less cortisol and adrenaline surge we have. That's better for our hormonal system. So really important there out of the gates. So that's my functional glucose tolerance testing. Okay, and then again, what makes it perimenopause? Symptoms are clustered around menstrual changes, irregular cycles, skipping cycles, very heavy flow, lots of menopausal symptoms starting to happen throughout the month. Issues are cyclical and hormonally timed, often starts in the early to mid 40s. But guess what? It's happening in the 30s today. And then testing shows lower progesterone first. I see this in my females in their 20s though. And then erratic estrogen levels as well. And we may also see low DHEA levels alongside. So you want to look at everything combined here, guys. I just want to lay this out. There's a lot of things you got to look at. If you go to your conventional MD, though, they may just say, hey, this is aging. They may recommend an antidepressant, maybe even a birth control pill if you're still cycling. And they think your hormones are erratic because, frankly, a birth control pill does smooth out the hormones, but you're artificially bumping it up. It's artificially high, and there's synthetic estrogens, and it makes it harder on your liver, too. So it's not fixing the underlying issue. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please let me know in the comments down below. I want this information out to y'all because you may be told that this is in your head. You may be, hey, referred to it for a psych evaluation, right? This is not in your head. Your hormones and your neurotransmitters play a major role in your brain, how you feel. It changes how your cells function at a physiological level, right? All right, there's a saying that environment is stronger than willpower. Well, guess what? Hormones and neurotransmitters are stronger than willpower. And if your hormones and neurotransmitters are going wonky, you're going to feel wonky. And if we just tell you it's all in your head, that's not true. There's actually a reason why it's happening, and we can get to the root cause. I've seen it. My 15-year career, 5,000 plus patients, we can get massive resolution and allow women to either get their hormones back on track and be more regular and even improve fertility if you're of the cycling age, or if you're of the later cycling into perimenopause, get the hormones more stable so we can sail into menopause. Or even if you're on the menopausal side, we can work to get the hormones more stable again and allow you to cruise into menopause with less symptoms, better mood, better libido, better hair, skin, nails, all of the good things that may have been deteriorating in the last decade. There's a reason why it's happening. So if you enjoyed today's video, please let me know in the comments below. If you want to dive in deeper, you want more support on the functional medicine root cause nature of why this is happening, there'll be a link down below to reach out to my staff and team to see if you're a good fit. We can help you see patients worldwide on that side of the fence and do testing as well. All right, if you enjoyed it, thumbs up and comments below.